Everyone well? Yeah. When you get up this old, you're just glad to be breathing. If something wasn't hurting, we'd think something's wrong. Yeah. Well, it's good to see you. Hope you have a good day and a good week. Studying the book of Judges. Got your Bibles, will be turning the latter section of chapter 3 where we are. And we'll pick up in about verse 26 in here just a moment, just get a little background and bring us back up to date. And we'll go from there. Before we begin, however, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll start. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We give thee thanks, O Father, for the day we've had, for the blessings that we enjoy day by day. We're grateful for the gift of thy Son, the hope that we have in him. We're grateful for the sacrifice he made on our behalf. We are mindful, Father, that we are sinful creatures, think, say, and do things contrary to thy will from time to time, and we come before thee humbly now, begging thy forgiveness, and we pray thy help, O Father, to help us through whatever difficulties we may have. We pray, O Father, that thou would be with those that are not able to be here because of sickness, the things that inhibit him, and be with them that also ministered to them, that those that are sick ones and infirm, that they'll have the things that they need to have their health improved, if it be thy will. We're grateful for thy word now, Father, and as we study it, we pray that our minds might be open to thy truths, and we might gain the things that we need to grow stronger in our faith with thee and our relationship with thee and one another. Continue to bless us, keep us in thy care always. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen. Chapter 3, the book of Judges. We are looking presently circumstances regarding Ehud and the fact that now, while he is judge, is overcoming the King Eglon, and as we've already studied thus far, he has gone over into Moab and with the effort to take the tribute, the taxes and things of this nature, as we would call it, to Eglon, as evidently there may have been a particular time that had been assigned for these things to take place, and upon the selection of Ehud, then the people have determined that they would send him to send the tribute. And so number of things, as you might recall, that took place. In the meantime, remember also he had evidently been one that was capable as far as metalworks is concerned, because it states that he fashioned the dagger, or as we also noted, most likely something on the order of a short sword, and then made the opportune times to get Eglon alone with himself, and then with his left hand, because he was left-handed, took the sword from his side that was hidden under his garment, and then thrust with great force into the belly of the fat king, and to the point where the hilt of the sword went into the flesh as well, and the flesh closed over it, so he couldn't pull it out. All right, so this is basically where we are at this time. And when Ehud left, and recall again that this was in the summer, on the summer porch, so to speak. It was kind of like a portico that most likely is on a higher floor that doesn't allow people just to walk in. So most likely there was just one entrance to come in. But what Ehud must have done is found him a way to come from that second floor and climb down somehow or the other. And so he was able to escape unnoticed. And he would have to gather together with those of his entourage that had come from Israel over here, and then make their way out. And then he talks about, as we noted in the last verse that we studied, that those that were the servants of Eglon, of course, had waited upon really his order. Eglon had told them to get out and to be quiet. And so that's what they were doing. They were honoring that, but time starts going on and on and on and on. And they begin to be just a little bit embarrassed over the fact that they have not been able to take care of the king They're commonly going in and out and checking on things. That's the way servants would be in a palace and things of this nature. And so finally the point comes, they figured, well, we better go in and see what's going on. And they took a key, which we made note of the fact. It's clear that evidently that there were those that had some knowledge of how to do something of that nature during this particular point in time, and opened the door. And that's when they find Eglon that is dead, and most likely died fairly quickly from that wound. Now then, that brings us then to verse 26. Anybody have any comment, questions about where we are up to this point? Now, just to give you just a little bit of an idea, if I can, if you can see that right there, you see Moab? Okay. Now that what that does is that takes in this area right here. Now, most likely, the area of the palace is going to be somewhere in this vicinity, I'm guessing. But the reason I say that is because of what we're about to see in Ehud's escape. I don't think that he's going to tarry very long, but it's going to take just a little bit of time for him to be able to make the distance from here to the area that he's going to be coming to, which is going to be in this vicinity right along in here. So that's got to take a little bit of time. And some of the events that are going to transpire, obviously, you're going to, I think, our tendency on occasion when we read through things like this, it's going from one point to the next without consideration of the time and things that have to take place for these things actually to occur. So we have to read into those particular matters. So let's go on to verse 26, and we'll look there. Ehud escaped while they tarried. So there's time already that's involved here. And he passed beyond the quarries and escaped to Sarath. So there is some time, obviously, that has taken place here. It makes you wonder as to whether or not that this has gone more than a day, or perhaps several hours that have gone by for him to lie. If he was on, and it's very possible that he may have been on something of a horseback or mule or perhaps camels or something of this nature. Remember, again, he was with an entourage that had to bring all these things there. So it's most likely that they were going to have several animals in order to be able to bring the tribute. I don't think that they're going to leave those things or leave the animals and things there. And they may come back and get those stuff later. But nevertheless, it is the fact that most likely that when they have left the things, they still have their animals and be able to make their way back into Israel. So they made it past the borders of Moab. Now the quarries he's talking about here. Now remember, we've already talked about some of the quarries, and that would have been the limestone images that were most likely found within the palace area. That is my estimation, and some others also estimate that too. So he's talking about those types of stones. Now these quarries here are evidently landmark stones that marking the borders of Moab. And so I would think that would not be something that be so necessary anyway to even make note, because again, when you obviously, one of the interesting things about this is, now of course, again, as I stated, this is the area of Moab right here. And the reason I say that's a bit interesting is because this area right in here. Now, if you'll notice that is Ammon, if I understand, is really more up in this area. It could be in this area here, and then Gilead here. But this is the area where the tribe of Reuben is. Reuben was in this vicinity, so that makes it just a little bit interesting. It may have been somewhere in this vicinity across this area here where that he may have made his way back to the area of Sarath. And Sarath is not a place that we know specifically, but it is believed to be along the area. Remember that, see if I can get my little thing to come back up here. Come on, baby. There we go. The tribe of Ephraim is in this vicinity right here, and Benjamin is right in here. So, and it's considered to be along the border of Benjamin and Ephraim. So this would be one of the areas that's going to go. And there's evidently some reason as to why it is that he's going to go to that area. Anybody want to venture a guess as to why he's going to go to that particular area? It is most likely that this, you've got several valleys, creeks and brooks and things that are in this vicinity. And I want you to imagine something for just a moment. It's hard for us to comprehend it because we're so used to it. They didn't have cars and trucks and things of that nature back during that time. So you don't have a lot of highway noise. They didn't have jets, so you don't have a lot of that noise. You've ever lived out in the country, most of you have at some point in time. You go out in the evening, especially in wintertime or fall, some occasions like that. What do you hear? If that. It is very, very quiet. So you've got that to take in consideration, but there would also be specific mountains in here. Like I say, with certain mountains as they would be in certain areas where you would have the valleys and some of the streams and things of this nature. Then Ehud is going to reach one of those areas, as you're going to now see in verse 27. When he was come, what did he do? All right, have a trumpet blown. So he's going to go most likely to the top of one of these mountains, have this trumpet blown, most likely some sort of horn off an animal or something of this nature, where that sound is going to carry for miles. And I think it is the case that the reason why this would be done would be familiar to the people of Israel at that time, that this is the sound of an alarm. There's a call being made. And men of the different tribes, there would be word that's going to be going out to the different tribes and things of this nature. There's a meeting of the men that's being called. And so now you've got to take the time. So this is involving time now for all these men to come to this particular area where you're seeing right here. And he's going to come down from the mountain, those that are also with him, and he's going to meet with the assembly of the Israelites on this occasion. Now, like I say, that's not going to happen in just a matter of a couple of minutes. You know, the sound goes out. So now there's going to be people that's going to be sending the message out. There may be other horns that may be sounded out in different portions that have heard this. It's like, sending the signal here, the signal's going to be picked up, sent out here. And so that people all around in the areas of Israel are going to be able to understand that there's an alarm that's being set out. So the word is going to be sent most likely where Ehud's going to be, and they're going to then come to this area where he's going to meet with them. So now, that's not going to be just overnight either. That's going to take some time. So now that this is beginning to take place, evidently, I think Ehud also realizes the situation that's going to transpire with the Moabites too. So now let's go back to Moab. Now, you ever watch some of these programs on television where you got an event that takes place and then it will go to another scene over here, perhaps while this scene is taking place. And so these things are transpiring at the same time. And yet eventually you'll see it kind of all catch up toward the end of the program. And you may be going back and forth. Well, it's kind of what we're going to do here. Because now we're going to take our scene back to Moab. Ehud and those guys are gone. Now the servants, they go in, they find the king is dead. So now they're alarmed. Now what do you think they're going to do? Okay, so they're going to send out an alarm. King's dead. There's the shock that starts with in this situation. Kind of give you a bit of an idea here. Remember our 9/11 situation that took place? How many of us were glued to the TVs when these things were going on? And were we not just absolutely just in shock about what was happening. Well, when things like this were going on, if you would recall some of the photographs and some of the filming that was done where people were just standing there and watching. You recall all that? They're just standing and watching. Well, that's typical. We're trying to process what is taking place. Now then, these people, once the word gets out, people are going to, there is this sense of just unbelief that something like this is going to be taking place. But one of the things that they're going to have to do fairly quickly is what? They're going to have to get somebody to take the place. So, yeah. So, and that may be something that could happen rather quickly if he has perhaps a male heir or something of that nature, where they go ahead and have him proclaimed king, and they're going to have to get him up to date as to what's going on and that sort of matter. But they're also then, in the meantime, starting to put together evidences as to what happened to Eglon. And then, of course, you're going to have, while this is going on, they're going to have to go through the process of his burial or embalming and all that. And some of that, on occasion, takes months, depending on how it is that they would do it. So this is, again, not something that's just going to transpire overnight. So now they're going to start putting the evidence together. Who's the last person to see it? Ehud. So that most likely the servants are going to know that. So that's going to be something that they're going to put together. And then, okay, Israel is responsible for this. And so what do you figure they're going to be doing? Okay, so they're going to start putting things in order to enact revenge. That's not going to happen overnight. So there's everything that has to be planned in order to do it. All right, let's go back to our example of 9/11. Our situation takes place. Did we respond the next day? No. In fact, you remember President Bush got a little bit of flack for not acting quicker than he did. But what was the reasoning for him taking the time? 2 or 3 reasons. You got to analyze the situation. You got to allow a little bit for grief and cleanup and things of this nature. Number 2, you got to find out who's responsible. And then you're going to have to put things in order once you find this out as to how it is that you're going to accomplish the mission. Then you got to define the mission. So there's numbers of things that have to take place. And so now you look at this situation where Moabites are concerned, I would suspect that they're going to go through something along that same time. So now again, think of it. You got time frame that's taking place. All right. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is not happening just back to back to back, day by day or hour to hour. You've got days, weeks, perhaps even months that are going to be transpiring between these passages that you're reading right here. Okay. So that's what we saw in verse 27. Blew the trumpet in the mountain of Ephraim. Remember, there again is the area where we had just talked about, close where the Sirath. We don't know exactly where that is, but it's evidently in the areas close to the borderline, from what I'm understanding, from Ephraim and Benjamin. And the children of Israel went down with him from the mount, and he before them. Now then, this is where we come to verse 28. And he says to them, follow after me. Now, it's already been determined, is it not, that Ehud had been selected by God to be the deliverer. So that's the reason, upon their understanding of that's the reason why they sent him to Eglon to start with. Okay? This is where this whole process is going to start, with that. So when he comes back and evidently is reported on what it is that has happened, you imagine what that conversation might have been like, and what that report would have been like. There's going to be some apprehension on some fronts, but then also there's going to be this sense of, oh, all right, somebody's finally done something. The apprehension is going to be, okay, we're going to be likely at war. But if we recount, if God's behind us, there's not so much of a problem here. And there's where our problem has been over the last little while we've been under the thumb of Eglon, because we hadn't been with God so much. So there are a lot of things that most likely going through their minds, but he says, follow me. And here's the important statement. For the Lord hath delivered your enemies, the Moabites, in your hand. So that's something, as he speaks of it in past tense, as if it's already happened. Don't you love the way that that's stated? You know, in other words, you don't have to worry about what's about to happen. God's already given us victory. So all you got to do is just do what I tell you to do, and this is going to be a cinch. It'll be taken care of. So just kind of keep that in mind. They've delivered him. He's delivered them into your hand. And so they went down after him, and they took the fords of Jordan. Now, he's not talking about the F-150s or anything of that nature. That's a little bit before the time of Henry. What's he talking about when he's talking about the fords of Jordan? Okay. They evidently, when you ford something, you're crossing over. Okay. And this is evidently, there were 2 or 3 spots that must have been shallows, because Jordan River is not very wide anyway. And there would be certain places of shallows where there would be areas to cross. Now, there's one interesting thing evidently about where these areas would have been. They're somewhat restricted, evidently. That means there were not wide open spaces. And if you've ever seen some of the photos of the areas around there, you kind of get the idea. There would be some places more up to the north. There may be more wide open, but it is something that the places that were kind of restricted. So now, if that be the case here, what was it that Ehud did? Notice here, they went down with it. They took the fords of Jordan toward Moab and suffered not a man to pass over. Meaning what? Okay, they're not going to be able to go either way. Now, I want you to think of something. I want you to remember something. There's a key element to this too. The reason I say they're not going to be able to go either way, why did I mention that? Do you remember when Eglon and his confederates, the Ammonites, the Amalekites, overtook Israel? There was a particular city that they took control over. Jericho. All right. If you'll notice again, come on, baby. There we are. You see right there where Jericho is? All right. Here's the city of the River Jordan. Here's Moab. Okay. Now, they had evidently a major force in Jericho since they've overtaken it. Now, they would most likely, and he's going to mention how many here in a minute. You probably already seen it. But he's going to have some, I'm sure, in different parts of the land to maintain this control. Okay? It's going to be kind of like a police force, making sure everything is like what the Romans would do later, but even at a greater degree. So now, it doesn't make any difference how many it's going to be. It may have been the entire 10,000. It wouldn't make any difference ever how many it was. But I would suspect somewhere in the vicinity, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 likely is going to remain here, while several of the others are going to be in different parts of the country. So at least you've got these in Jericho. Now, I would figure, now remember again, there's time span here. Don't you figure the people in Jericho have now learned of the death of Eglon? It is very likely. So, as to whether or not how long a time it took for them to get that message is one thing. I would figure as well, with the presence of these other officers and things that are coming in, and having perhaps even gotten the word of the trumpet call as to what was taking place, and the Israelites then collecting in the area of Shechem where Ehud's going to be, that somebody has gotten back to the city of Jericho and told them what's about to take place here. Well, this is where the speed involves as far as Ehud's concerned, because he's beating them to the punch. Because what he's done, he's already now sent troops to the areas where these fords, the areas where you would cross Jordan, is going to be, and he's got it blocked off. They can't get back to Moab to add themselves to the force coming in, and the force that's already on the eastern side is not going to be able to cross because Ehud's got it blocked. So I can imagine now what the conversation is going to be on these 10,000 troops that may be in and around the area of Jericho. Now, there's a couple of things about well, let's just note it in the next verse. Let's just go to verse 29. And they slew of Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty. What's that term mean? Stout. Robust, stout men. These are fellows that were chosen of Eglon, some of his choicest troops, to be in this area. And so now these 10,000 of his prime troops, men of valor, they're killed. That not one of them escaped. Now, there's a thing or two to kind of consider here. Now, you look at this from Israel's point of view to start with. How was Eglon able to bring them under his thumb? How was he able to subdue them? All right, it's the power that he had in his troops with the confederacy of the Ammonites and the Amalekites and things of that nature, which you remember were their cousins, the Israelites' cousins. Now, it is the remainder of that force that keeps them a mindset that confederacy could still come in here and kill us all. And there's just the threat of circumstances like that that's going to keep you from doing a whole lot. But now, when you think of it, if there's only 10,000 troops, if the people of Israel had decided to send out a warning earlier, if they had turned themselves to God, there wouldn't have been a problem to start with. They wouldn't have had done this. But if they had determined to turn back to God earlier, call could have gone out. There could have been well over 100,000 people. And I can just about tell you what's going to be the percentage-wise of the capability of 10,000 men being able to survive an onslaught of over 100,000. That's not likely going to take place. So I can imagine what they're probably thinking now if they're hearing that the Israelites are assembling. This ain't looking good. So at this particular point, they're thinking, I'm sure, about trying to get back across the river. And obviously, at this point, they're not able to do it. And then, as we've seen in verse 29, what effort that they may have made was not successful because Ehud and the Israelite forces have killed them all. Question, comment? All right, we'll go to verse 30. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel. So now the tables are turned. Moabites had their control over Israel for how long now? 18 years. 18 years. And now this has totally been turned over now. And that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest now how long? 80 years, which is 80 years. There have been some that have surmised that it's probably 40 years, and this 40 has added to the time of 40 years rest unto Othniel. I'm not particularly sharing that view. It could be, but I don't see it. I don't see why the reason would be to say something of that nature. I'm taking it on the face value, the fact that this is what the situation was, because it mentions here, and the land had rest 80 years, and would connect with what? The defeat of Moab. Now then, it's going to have the rest. It doesn't say anything about what we saw from Canaanites earlier. It's talking about the rest now that they would have for some 80 years. And that is talking about, if you count generations by 20 years, you're talking about 4 generations right here. So you've got a period of time where there are going to be those that have experienced this situation, they're going to die out. And so there's going to be a time when there's going to be generations that may not even know anything about what had happened under the time of the Moabites. In your conversations with young people now that have been born since 2001, how many of them can relate to what we talk about when we talk about 9/11? Now, for all practical purposes, it's only been one generation, because you're just at 2001. So we're talking 22 years. And you already are seeing people that have basically just dismissed what it was that had taken place. A lot of our young people don't know anything about it, and so they hadn't been taught much about it. There's not been much information been given about it. So it'll be something that's going to be past information. So now imagine, if you would, 4 generations of time they're going to pass. And so a lot of these things are not going to be taken into consideration. Okay. Now then. Yeah.
Excuse me if I could interrupt this particular edition talks about, we talked about it, dates at the beginning of each chapter.
Yep.
And 3 is noted to around 1406.
Yep.
And then Deborah and such is 1316.
Right.
So that would be 9.
Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity. You talk about from the beginning of his time and things of this nature. So, but after his time, and of course, and then the period, you're going to have 80 years as when he is in this particular position. And there's some interesting things, as we're going to learn from just verse 31 and the early portion of chapter 4, about the time frame. It makes it kind of interesting. And when you don't think there's really a lot here in verse 31, there are several things to really take into account here. Any other question on that? Now, do keep in mind, as I pointed out a few weeks ago, since we're talking in a period of about 1406, and you're coming in, and of course the numbers go less as you get closer to the birth of Christ. So anywhere from here, you're coming into a period of about 1200 or 1100 some odd BC, and the period of the judges here. So there's a couple of 300 some odd years or more, closer, actually, I think close to 500 if I remember, of all this particular period. So now, this of course is corresponding to the new kingdom in Egypt. This is the time period you might remember I talked about your Moses period, Seti, Ramses, all of those during that particular time frame. And so it corresponds to that period. All right. Now, verse 31, interesting things here. And after him, after who? Ehud. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. Now, is there anything that you find interesting about that text? Yeah, yeah, a little bit. The reason why this passage is interesting is because of chapter 4, verse 1. Look at chapter 4, verse 1. You looking at it? And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. Why did he mention Shamgar there?
Chapter 5, verse 6.
Yeah, that's the only other mentioning of Shamgar. And just basically the only thing it's mentioning there, again, he's the son of Anath. You see why I'm saying this is a bit interesting? Why isn't there the mention of Shamgar in that text after he is dead? So the reason why I find that to be interesting is this. It makes you wonder as to whether or not Shamgar was actually a judge. It makes you contemplate that because there are several different things here. You're looking at this time, obviously there's going to be the death of Ehud. That's not mentioned until the next chapter, chapter 4:1. And there's no information about his death or there information about his life or his works right here. Another indication is going on here is the people have begun to turn to evil again, and they've been vexed by the Philistines at this particular point. And about the only other thing that you're getting here is the statement, and after Ehud. And that's about the only thing that we have here, other than the last two words or the last phrase in the verse, and he also delivered Israel. But it didn't say that God raised him up. You see my point? It doesn't say that God raised up Shamgar. It doesn't mention the fact that God made Shamgar judge or anything of this nature. So it's not clear. There are things that give us some indication that that's a possibility when you look at the idea of Shamgar, or him being having delivered them, and then the phrase "and after him." So what do we connect here? And after him, obviously after Ehud, but why would he say it like that? So this is what's a little bit interesting to me, is that it may have been in this 80-year period of peace, closer to perhaps the end of it, that perhaps Ehud may have died or is already so old he's not able to function as he normally might do, certainly not militarily. And the indication I don't want to bring any supposition because I'm not in the position to know, because it's not clear enough to really get some idea about it. But it almost seems to me that Shamgar has become what Barak did for Deborah. You get my drift? It just almost seems like that's the situation with him, that he becomes what Ehud could not carry out to do, being old, and becomes the military leader. And he's the one that now is going to deliver Israel from the Philistines, who were vexing them, but evidently not to a point that they were under subjection, because it doesn't mention the fact in the text that they were under subjection. It just mentions the fact that they were evidently vexing him here, and he has to deal with them, and he does. And he does it rather interestingly. He's going to kill 600 Philistines. So it's like Brother Milton said a little while ago. It kind of reminds you a little bit about Samson, who killed 1,000 of them with the jawbone of an ass. So there's no way that could have been done without the power of God. I don't think that it could have been done here with Shamgar without the power of God, because of what he's using. We know what an ox goad is. Did a little bit of research on that.
It said right here, it's a rod about 8 feet long,
Yeah.
sharpened to a point which was sometimes covered with iron.
Yep. What I learned, of course, they could go anywhere. It depends upon what the ox was doing. If you're pulling a cart or you pulling a plow. And what the ox goad was for was whoever it is that's guiding the ox would use this pole that could be anywhere between 7 and 10 feet long, on an average about 8. Again, depends on what you were doing. One might not be necessary to be as long as it is. But what I understand too, that most of them, particularly at the base, were a circumference of 6 inches, which means it's about 3 inches wide at the handle. Now, I want you to think on that for just a minute. You got a piece of wood that's 6 inches in circumference, somewhere between 7 and 10 feet long. I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have to be stout to deal with that. Then if you've got some piece of iron or metal on the end of it, and that's what they would do with those things. They would, most of the times, they would put a little sharp edge on the sides of them, perhaps on both sides. So what they would do is they'd reach out there. If that ox is going off this way, they didn't want to go this way. They'd reach out there and pop him on the side of the head to make him turn his head, go back that way. And if he starts going too far, they take it over here and slap him back. So you're going to have to be fairly stout to be able to do that. So that's an amazing thing to me to begin with. And that's the reason why that it has to be fairly substantial piece of wood, because an ox is not just some weakling thing. Some of those, if it got down as too weak and that ox was going to be stubborn, like some of them can, and then sling its head around, it just break the thing off. So it's going to have to be something substantial for that to take place. Now then, Shamgar is taking an ox goad, and imagine what he's going to be doing now is taking this long 8-foot, 9-foot, 10-foot pole, and he's going to kill 600 Philistines with this thing. Now, most likely he's got a spear or something, or perhaps what we'd call, what is that? How yours? Maybe, where you have the little axe or something at the point on the end, something of that nature. And most may not have done something of that nature. They may have come up with something during that time that's more of a medieval weapon, but they may have had something that had a point on either side like that. But imagine being able to kill somebody with that, and unless you've got the power of God, how are you going to accomplish this? You're wielding something. You're talking about 10-foot circumference here, or 20 foot in all, and somebody could just get in the way and block that and catch him. So how is it that he's accomplishing this without the power of God? I don't see how it's possible to do. And you could stab several different people with one, but unless, again, you've got the power of God behind it, now you've got to pull all of that out and be able to go after the next one, or otherwise you're going to have the bodies on the end of this, which means the power of God's going to have to be with you while you're still poking folks. It's an amazing thing, and a testament again to the power of God to help in this situation. So the bottom line is the bottom line in verse 31. And he delivered Israel. Okay? Now then, quickly we go over then to chapter 4. And we look at this situation again here. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. Now again, the question comes out, why didn't he mention Shamgar? So that's what's interesting again to me, is why he's not mentioned here. So that tends to lead me in the direction of the fact that Shamgar may have been more of a military leader, and he may have set in place for Ehud as a judge or something of this nature, but it's not mentioned as such. Is there a text that mentions Shamgar as judge? The only thing, again, like we say, that could even relate to that is and after him. That after Ehud came after him, but there's still nothing there that mentions him as judge. So what, we can speculate all day long on that, but nevertheless, he becomes part of Israel's deliverance at this particular point in time. And I've seen speculations of that nature, but in fact of the matter is, there's not really anything that tells us anything about him other than his father, Anaf, and there's nothing about him, to my knowledge. Just there's no history or information given about him, so we don't know anything about the circumstance regarding Shamgar other than what's mentioned in these two texts here in chapter 3 and then in chapter 5, and that's it. Any other comment? Well, I could go on, but in fact, I could do this all night. This is something that just intrigues the fire out of me. It's just interesting looking at a lot of this history. Then you begin to note the practical applications that you're able to make to you. We just like what we pointed out. You've seen the comparisons between when people lose information regarding their history that's not being passed on like it should. You're destined to repeat it, and that's the very thing that's happening to them. That's what's happening to us, and the problems that are going to come as a result of it. And so to me, it's just, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this. To me, it's just a good study. I've enjoyed it thus far. I don't know if any of you are, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And your song, brother.
Let's sing 225. Oh, heaven holds all to me. 225.
225. Get my breath. I hope these studies will be something that would invoke within us the realization of our maintaining our relationship with God. There's the reason why Jesus made the statement that he did in Revelation 2, and he was talking to one of the churches of Asia when he's telling them in chapter 2 and 10, be thou faithful unto death. Now, those are some of the very same words, essentially, not in those exact terms, basically the very same thing that Moses told the people of Israel. It's the same thing that Joshua told the people of Israel. And now it's not only, now one thing you have to take into account, what he's telling them is not only just in relation to their staying in the land that had been promised them, but that land also becomes as an antitype for what? Heaven. Heaven. We're talking about crossing over Jordan to the promised land, going over through death to get to eventually our promised land. There were numbers of those that were God's people. People of Israel were his people. And because of their rebellion, they not only lost the opportunity to make it to the physical promised land, they were not able to make it to the promised land of heaven. They were not able to get there. And you remember one of the statements that was made by Paul regarding Abraham as to why he sojourned according to God's instruction. He was looking for a better city whose builder and maker is God. That's the reason why he did it, and continued to do so, evidently, till he died. That's being the reason why he's called the father of the faithful. And that's the one that we ought to emulate, to imitate. The concept of being faithful unto death is because there are occasions when we find ourselves weakened by the things that are around us and we become indifferent. People of Israel, we are seeing how they did it and how it cost them. So we need to be mindful of the applications that we learn here. So it becomes, I think, fitting to take that into account. There may be someone here that may be watching with us as well that haven't obeyed the gospel of Christ. The sacrifice of Jesus was made on our behalf so that we would not have to live under the bondage of sin and die to be forevermore separated from our Maker, an eternal death. But if in fact that we want to find ourselves apart from that and avail ourselves of what he has provided in order for us to be redeemed from sin, that we need to take advantage of it. That is, believing that Jesus is the Christ. We turn away from sin. We acknowledge Jesus with the mouth, and we're baptized into him for the remission of sins. But if we've done that, even now as people of his, we could be like a lot of these Israelites who went in every direction but the right one on occasion, and find ourselves being subjected to the judgments of God. If we find ourselves in any such situation like that, then we need to reconcile ourselves with him. And we're here to help, whatever the need may be. While we stand, while we sing the song.
However precious they heal, yet there's a country to which I am going. Heaven owes all to me. Heaven owes all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Will be my treasure. Heaven owes all to me. Why should I long for that world with its sorrows, when in their home o'er the sea, millions are singing the wonderful story. Heaven owes all to me. Heaven owes all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven owes all to me.
Be seated, please.
Again, it's good to see everyone. Glad that you came. Encourage others to come and to be with us in our studies. One of the things, incidentally, that we are planning for our summer months, June and July, is 8 Wednesday nights in that area to have a summer series. And like a lectureship on a Wednesday nights, we'll have different speakers come in and deal with a particular theme. And so we'll hope that you'll encourage others to take time out of their midweek and come to be with us during those occasions. So be praying about that. We're going to be getting things ready for that. And just, in fact, the matter is I'll be working on that some this week and next week as well, kind of getting things arranged for that. So kind of keep that in mind. It's kind of an exciting thought to have. And encouraging these others to come in and having some good lessons during the summer months. Don't forget our services Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, 10 and 11. And again, encourage others to come. We have several that are sick ones we need to keep in mind. Brother Jody, they took him to the hospital yesterday, and because he was just some pretty serious complications of it coming from his situation. So carry him in, and they give him some antibiotics basically and send him home. And they haven't determined right yet when his surgery is going to be. Kind of frustrating, just to be frank. His situation is rather serious, and they need to deal with that. But I know there are other people that got serious situations too, but I know they got kind of messed up with the weather situation. And so sometimes there are things we have to live with, but it still makes it difficult. But do remember him and Sister Jimmy, a little bit tickled. I've got a couple of calls from Linda today, and she called me once, and she was rather distressed, bless her heart, over Sister Jimmy's circumstance. The nurses had called her and told her that, she just won't talk to us. Just Sister Jimmy, wouldn't talk to anybody. Figured that she was just so depressed and things of this nature. It's going to make it difficult for her. She's just so unhappy that she. And so she was calling me, not knowing what to do and things of this nature. She said, I'm about to go see her anyway. So she called me again a little while later, pep in her voice this time. She said, I went in and saw Mama, she calls her. And they said, as soon as I came in, Sister Jamie just smiled and started talking. They said, well, they were complaining to me that you weren't talking. She said, I don't have anything to say to them. I don't have anything to talk to them about. And before she even said that, I was about to put it out myself. So that's what she's about to say. She didn't have anything to talk to them about. But that's Sister Jimmy. She is one of a kind, and she's a jewel of sorts, I'm telling you. And but she does keep up with it quite a bit. She watches our studies, and she was rather distressed over the fact that she was not able to watch Sunday. Anytime that she's not able to keep in contact, it really distresses her. And I know some others that have the very same thing too. But do keep her in mind in the prayer. She's going through her rehab, and hopefully that it's helping. She's kind of pulled to one side right now, and I guess that's because of that break, is to make sure that there must be a little bit of relief that has in that particular position. But she's going through rehab. Hopefully that'll turn out well. Do keep in mind Brother Lindell and Sister Virginia and others that are shut in. Nashville? Okay. I say Nashville because I know how it's pronounced because I was born there. It's Nashville. But
I don't know really what's wrong with her. They thought she might have a brain bleed, or it might be something about her back.
I was going to go see her tomorrow. Okay, I'm glad to know that, because I have some of the books. She was wanting some Sunday school books and things like that just to work in, so I was going to carry some to her. Okay. Neil Taylor, Brother Adol's widow. And some of the things that we were going through when we were cleaning out, Brother Milton and I were cleaning out the other day, was a notepad that I don't know if it's Brother Adol's or not, but somebody from there had his name on it. Some notes that had been made, and I was going to take that to her as well. So I thought she'd probably appreciate that. Note here, thanks so much for the beautiful flowers sent. Appreciate thoughtfulness so much, and that's from the Betty Taylor family. And she is truly missed. Her and Brother Rack, all of those. These old timers that have gone past us, but we do keep them in mind, and appreciate the card. There is, they've moved it up a month. The lectureship that takes place in New Albany. I was on this last year, but it was the first week in May at that time, but now it looks like the first week in April, starts April the 5th. And it's going to be a weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday lectureship. And let's see. I was looking. I'm guessing the first speech is going to be the theme. Looks like the Christian mission, something of that nature, but it's kind of hard to tell. You've got Christian confirmation, Christian education, Christian leadership and community, religious or spiritual question, Christian leadership in the home, who is the Lord, what it means to be a disciple, here am I, send me. So you've got these different lessons that are going to be, so we'll post that on there in case there be those that might be interested in going to the lectureship over in New Albany. Trying to think if there was anything else I know of that's going on. You know, anyone else that's sick, we need to know. Chloe? Yeah, Chloe's been having some trouble and having also a problem getting doctors to treat her and to take her serious is what it is that she's having to deal with. So hopefully they'll be able to figure that out. She's here though, isn't she? She didn't make it tonight. I thought she made it. Okay. She went. That's right. She went on home with Macy. Okay. Okay. Or me. Well, there's Macy right there. Okay. She went home. Okay. All right. Didn't see her. Anything else? If not, Brother Bob, you dismiss us, please.
Shall we stand? Father, we love you. We know that you are our God, that you bless us in many, many ways that oftentimes we don't think of. Please help us to be more thankful every day, every hour. Be with those that are mentioned sick. Oftentimes there's sickness and trouble that come our way. We pray that you would bless those, that you would give them comfort that only you can. Bless this congregation as we work in this community. Always help us to be a shining light to those around us. This prayer we offer in the name of thy Son who died. Amen.
Yeah.